How are you, young lady?
Just wishing I could go home, go to bed. I'm tired. But the good news is, I got called to jury duty. I waited.
August 21st, 2023. We're here for a governing body meeting, and I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Osman? Here. Councilmember Rawlings?
Here.
Councilmember Harrison?
Here.
Councilmember Kane?
Here.
Councilmember Azeltine?
Here.
Councilmember Sippel?
Here.
Councilmember Larson?
Here.
Councilmember Phila?
Here.
And Mayor Dennis present.
All right, thank you very much. The next item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. So as you're able, would you please rise and we will face the flag. Thank you. The next item is the approval of the agenda, and we do have an amended agenda in front of you all this evening, and the amended agenda has removed consent agenda items 8H and 8I. So with those two minor modifications, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve as as amended.
Second.
Motion from Ms. Harrison, second from Mr. Sippel. Is there any discussion?
Just a question, Mayor, is there a need for not working on the batteries at the Justice Center at this time? Are they going to last longer? Are we going to do something else, or what are we going to do?
Ms. Stoddard, do you have a response for that? Or is Ms. Bennett, maybe?
I think we're just cleaning up some detail. I believe this is going to be a 3-year agreement, and we just wanted to verify that we had all of the i's dotted and the t's crossed.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. If there's no further discussion, all in favor of the amended agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? It's approved unanimously. Thank you. Going to citizen comments, we have 2 citizens who've signed in to speak on East Village, and I will recognize you when we get to that on the agenda. And then 1 on a non-agenda item. So I'll recognize you now and ask you to come forward and state your name and address for the record. And if you could please keep your comments from 3 to 5 minutes, that would be appreciated. Margaret Berger.
My name is Margaret Berger. I live at 2716 West 118th Street, and it's only this long. This is just for some support.
Can you move your microphone down a little?
Is that good?
That's
Yes.
better,
Okay.
thank you.
I would like to congratulate the City of Leawood on its AAA financial rating. That is a singular accomplishment in this challenging economic landscape. It strengthens the city against the coming economic headwinds and is a wonderful legacy of this administration. In April of 2022, the city commissioned an art piece to commemorate our 75th anniversary. In the months since that commission, the national economic landscape has changed dramatically. The cost of this project has also spiraled. Conversations in this chamber concerning the advisability of continuing the project have not addressed the deteriorating U.S. economy and its effects on the citizens of Leawood. The United States has been downgraded from a AAA rating to a AA+ by Fitch, who has also announced that they are going to downgrade several of the banks, of the 70 banks that they rate. Credit card debt in this country is now over $1 trillion as the public uses their cards to meet their monthly expenses. In addition to these national economic pressures on the citizens of Leawood, various local governing bodies want to raise money by mill increases and taxes, adding to the burdens our citizens already face. Governments are charged with spending the taxpayer money in two ways. One is for taxpayer needs, and the other is for their wants. Most people can agree on what is a need. First responders, fire trucks, tree removal, those are our needs. Art projects are our wants. We are not, even in a booming economy, city art projects will be met with great controversy. We are not in a booming economy. These things have changed, and the deteriorating economic conditions for the Leawood citizens demand that a hard new look at this project and these realities should be discussed and taken into consideration before moving on with it. To not do so projects a tone-deaf attitude to the economic realities of the lives and the changing needs of the Leawood citizens. I'd like to leave you with this observation. A strategic pivot can be wise, courageous, and only add to a great legacy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Berger. We move now to our proclamation, Suicide Prevention and Action Month. And I will ask, is there anyone here in the audience to receive this proclamation? All right, thank you. Whereas September is recognized as Suicide Awareness Month, the National Suicide Prevention and Action Month proclamation was created to raise the visibility of mental health and proactive suicide prevention resources in our community. We also want to start the conversation destigmatize it, and help connect people with the appropriate support services. Whereas according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP, suicide is the second leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 10 and 34, with more than 48,000 people dying by suicide annually in the United States. Whereas according to Hope for the Day, HFTD, with an average of 132 suicides completed daily, and each one directly impacting 100 additional people, including friends, service members, family, social media connections, and neighbors, we can safely assume everyone has been impacted by suicide. Whereas the City of Leawood publicly places its full support behind those who work in the field of mental health, education, and law enforcement. Whereas local organizations like Suicide Prevention Services and national organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness and international groups like Hope for the Day are on the front lines of a battle that many still refuse to discuss, as suicide and mental illness remain too uncomfortable of a topic to talk about. Now, therefore, I, Peggy Dunn, Mayor of the City of Leawood, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2023 as National Suicide Prevention and Action Month in the City of Leawood, and urge Kansans to learn how they can help, because suicide prevention is everyone's business. Now we move to presentations and recognitions, and we have an introduction of a new employee, Michelle Kriks, planning official, Mr. Klein.
Council members, I'm very pleased to announce that we have a new hire, Michelle Kriks. Michelle Kriks actually worked here for about 4 years, starting back in 2013, and she agreed to take the position of planning official. She did a fabulous job when she was here, and so we're very excited about having her back. And so I'll let Michelle introduce herself a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. We are delighted to have you back. So.
Thank you, Mayor Dunn, members of the governing body. Michelle Kriks with Leawood Planning. I am starting my 3rd week here back with Leawood, and I am just thrilled to be back. I enjoyed my time when I was here before, and it's good to see a lot of familiar faces and new faces as I integrate back into the city of Leawood.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate your attendance, too. We have no special business this evening, so we move to consent agenda items 8A through R, and I would like to pull 8P, and I'll ask what else people would like to pull. Mr. Sipple.
I would like to pull 8A and 8O as in Oscar.
And 8O. All right. Ms. Kane?
8G as in girl, please.
All right. Anything else anyone would like to pull? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the remaining portion of the consent agenda, please.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Rawlings, second from Mr. Asseltine. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's approved unanimously. Thank you. 8A is accept appropriation ordinance numbers 2023-31 and 2023-32. Mr. Sipple.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to recuse myself from voting on this matter because my wife is a contract employee with the Parks Department and her name is listed as a payee. So I'm going to recuse myself.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion from Ms. Phila, second from Ms. Larson. Any other discussion on this? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And one recusal from Mr. Sipple for reasons stated. Thank you. 8G is resolution authorizing and approving the mayor to execute an agreement between the city and Apex Envirotech, Inc., in an amount not to exceed $39,240 pertaining to the clearing of debris at the old Parks Maintenance Facility. Ms. Kane.
Yes, I'm happy to read about the uses of this building by fire and police, you know, as opposed to public works. But I have a question about the mold issue. I deal with this with residential properties pretty often. So do I understand they did airborne mold tests inside and outside, and they came back higher inside than they did outside?
That's correct.
We did that in, I think, July this year.
Yeah, so this Apex is able to do that, because a lot of them just do visual tests, but and we're always stressing you need to have an airborne test. So we did indeed do airbornes.
Yes, and Apex has worked for us on other facilities that we have throughout the city, testing for mold and then remediation.
Okay, and so they didn't observe where it is, they just know the airborne came back high or inside.
We do know that there's quite a bit in the HVAC by the filter, and so part of the scope includes removing the filter and cleaning and removing all the mold that's associated inside the HVAC, but we don't know for sure if there's any behind the walls. They did poll a couple areas or 4 areas to check for mold inside the wall, and they did not see any.
Well, having had the flood, obviously, down there, we need to keep our people safe, and mold is nothing to mess with. So I'm glad to know that we're actually doing airborne tests, because a lot of these places will just do visuals, and nobody, even the dogs, cannot really tell what's there without doing the airborne scientific test. So glad to hear that we're doing it the right way. Thank you.
And this bid also includes testing it again once they get the building cleaned up.
Great, thank you. Thank you. With that, I move to approve.
Motion from Ms. Kane, second from Ms. Harrison. And I, too, am delighted to see the multiple uses, possible multiple uses for this building. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's approved unanimously. Thank you. 8O is Police Department Monthly Report. Mr. Sipple.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one quick question for the chief. On the 3rd page, you have your tables, and one of them shows that compared to the last 2 months, we've had a 50% increase in thefts from vehicles. And I wondered if there's an explanation. I mean, is it the summertime? Is it people leaving their car windows down? Or is it at the shopping centers? I know you always prompt people to close their garage doors and things like that, but is there a trend that we ought to be aware of here with thefts from vehicles?
Dale Finger, Police Chief. You know, these statistics and these particular crimes kind of go in waves. Thefts from vehicles and auto thefts in general have hit the area, the metro area, quite heavily this year. Those crimes are generally up across the board in whatever jurisdiction we're in. We still plead with the citizens to lock their cars, close their garage doors, etc. But we have had a few more instances compared to previous years where locked cars are even getting broken into by smashed windows, those types of things. But regardless, if the cars are unlocked and valuables or items of value are in sight, that just increases the likelihood that a theft is going to occur when thieves are going through the neighborhoods.
I know there's been a lot of coverage on the national news about smash and grabs and so forth in department stores and jewelry stores. Do the bad guys typically break the windows to get what they want, or do they just open the door? Or?
Generally speaking, they're going through unlocked cars.
Unlocked.
It's still fairly rare that they're going to try to enter a locked vehicle.
Okay. Thank you for your explanation, Chief. With that, I move to approve. We have one more question.
One more question. Chief, about the car thefts, are most of those stolen cars being stolen from, say, parking lots, or are those from homes and driveways and streets?
Again, that's all over the board.
It's a mix?
I mean,
Okay.
from residences as well as parking lots
Okay,
at businesses.
thank you. Nothing further.
Second.
So motion to accept by Mr. Sipple, second by,
I second. Well, I move to approve. I think she seconded.
okay, well,
Either-
Ms. Harris.
Happy to
Harrison,
second it.
Happy to second, all right. All right, any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you, Chief Finger. I pulled the fire department monthly report because I wanted to brag about our fire department on the, I guess it's really the first page of the report, your second page. The Johnson County EMS system, which includes the Leawood Fire Department, achieved the Mission Lifetime EMS Gold Achievement Award from the American Heart Association for 2023. Wow. This program is designed to showcase EMS organizations across the nation for excellent cardiac emergency care, which can include strokes and cardiac events. And I thought this was certainly worthy of congratulations. Chief Fitzgerald, I think it's wonderful. I know the great work you all do, and I just wanted to give you a shout out and congratulate you on this.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Chief, don't go away. Don't go away.
Mr. Rawlings.
Thank you. Speaking of heroes, I had the occasion to talk to Chief this morning about an issue that happened at 83rd and Wenonga where a life was saved. And could you explain what happened? I find it very interesting because I got some people that called and said they took away this guy in a body bag. And I said,
Oh, no.
Wait a minute. So anyway, could you explain what happened? And I find it very interesting.
Well, sure. Without going into too much detail, there was indeed a body bag involved. We actually use those in kind of a creative way in the county. If we find somebody in a truly hyperthermic state where their body temperature is extremely elevated, we'll use body bags because they're pretty much liquid resistant, and we'll actually flow water and ice over them to cool them as rapidly and aggressively as possible. So this was a case where the individual was found unconscious in an extreme case of heat stroke, and through the use of water and ice, temperature was dropped to where he became conscious and was transported. So it was close.
Wow.
Well,
Goodness.
kudos to the staff and the police department and animal control and all the people that showed up, I understand, so.
Definitely. Yep. It was
Thank
all
you.
hands on deck.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Zipper
Thank
on
you.
the inside.
Would you like to make a motion to accept the fire department monthly report?
Move for approval.
Second. Second from Ms. Villa. And if there's no further discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's approved unanimously. Thank you, Chief. Moving to the mayor's report, congratulations are also in order for Police Captain Brad Robbins, who's celebrating 28 years of service with the city of Leawood today. I don't know, well, there he is. Captain Robbins, thank you for joining us. Also, Fire Captain James Walker will celebrate 24 years on Wednesday. So we want to thank both of you for your outstanding service. There were two Leawood Chamber ribbon cuttings during the past 2 weeks, and I want to give my thanks to Councilmember Mary Larson for standing in for me at Taboo Knits, located at Town Center Plaza. And also thanks to Council Members Lisa Harrison and Chuck Sipple for participating at Kisling Family Dentistry, which is located at Market Square.
It's my dentist.
Is it?
Yeah.
New chamber members. So we appreciate their chamber membership and wish them much success. And that concludes my mayor's report. We have no council members' reports this evening. Ms. Stoddard, do you have any city administrator report?
I do not, thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. We move now to 12A, committee recommendations. This is resolution approving a final plan for Cornerstone Morningstar Senior Living, located north of 137th Street and east of Knoll Avenue. And do we have the applicant present to present? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Dunn and council members.
Good evening.
Do you buy them?
Don Roseman, Roseman Associate Architects, Oh, this is the wrong one. Get out of here. Mark. No, it's not. Oh, there it is. Okay, my apologies. Don Roseman, Roseman Associate Architects, 1526 Grand Boulevard. I'd like to thank everyone for this evening for the opportunity to be here. I'll keep it fairly brief in our presentation as a follow-up from our preliminary development plan submittal when we were here before. I'd like to first say that tonight you have members of both the development team, both myself and Judd from Phillips Engineering, but more importantly, we have the owner-operator both here in Morningstar and Confluent Development. Both of these gentlemen are here to answer questions, should we have any questions that come up in the presentation. Confluent Development and Morningstar are both located in Denver, Colorado. I think the most important part about this is that this is a collaboration that has worked on a significant number of senior living communities across the country. They together have worked on approximately 18 communities together. We've been fortunate enough to be involved in a little over half of those same projects, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. We have experience doing roughly 33 senior living projects across the country and have another 10 right now that are under development. So the collective team brings breadth and width to the city of Leawood in a proposed community. As the mayor said, this site is located at the northeast corner of 137th and Knoll Avenue, just north of Church of Resurrection in the site that's a current development right at the corner. It's approximately 4-acre site that we're going to be developing into 103 assisted living, memory care, senior living units. The proposed site has not changed significantly from when we were here with the preliminary development plan. We've made several revisions that came out of comments from both fire, building, staff, but also from our development as we proceeded with going through with the project. It remains 105,500 square feet. Previously at the preliminary, we were 106,000. So we've consolidated a little bit in terms of the overall gross square footage of the building. It is proposed to be 2 stories in height and has currently 70 parking spaces to serve the community. This is an outside rendering. If you are in the actual development looking to the southwest, and as you can see, there is a covered portico here to serve our residents so that if they come in during inclement weather, they can be out of the weather and have direct access into the building. It is 2-story construction. It will involve materials that are approved for the Cornerstone development community. We've worked very closely with staff in terms of getting to this process. It's been a very collaborative effort. I personally have met with both Mark and Catherine probably 4 times since we were last together, and they've always been very both accommodating and helpful in getting to this process. So kudos to both of them. This is a view of the rendering from the if you were across the street at Church of Resurrection coming north out of their private drive looking to the northwest. And again, you can see the corner of the building where it's an interactive space that has an outside patio area. There's natural flowers in an area that we've set aside right outside that space, and it shows the 2-story facility again. I think the big thing that I wanted to just point out is that we are here to answer any questions. We didn't want to take a lot of your precious time tonight. But I'd like to say that we are in agreement with the staff comments. There were 2 changes that were made that were in the staff report that we were in full agreement with. And there were 35 conditions that came out of the Planning Commission to you with a unanimous approval. We are in agreement with all 35 of those conditions with the slight amendment on both items number 10 and 26 as indicated in your staff report. And with that, I'd like to just say thank you again for your consideration, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Roseman. It looks like a beautiful addition to our community. Questions for the applicant, Mr. Sipple?
Just a straightforward question. Can you give us a summary of the qualifications of the staff, the management people who are going to be on site that are going to run this facility?
I'm going to let Mr. Lesniak address that.
Yeah, hello, nice to see you all again. My name is Brandon Lesniak. So to answer your question, it's a fully licensed community. Okay, so we're regulated by the county and the state to ensure it because we'll be having assisted living and memory care. So we have to meet the standards of the state and the health department in terms of the building, its operations. The administrative staff will have an executive director, we'll have a head of wellness activities, there'll be department heads, and then we'll have frontline staff that'll assist with ADLs. So the primary care that's taking place here would be activities of daily living is what ADL stands for. So we're helping with grooming, toileting, bathing, all meals, laundry, housekeeping, all really under one roof. Pain management, medication distribution, and things of that nature will take place there. And we do have licensed and certified staff that'll be administering all of that.
Would you help me understand the qualifications of the person who is going to be on in the leadership position on the midnight shift, midnight till 8 a.m.? What kind of qualifications does that person have?
In a perfect world?
In your world at
Yeah.
137th and Knoll.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's hard to think about what, and I would think we don't have a candidate for that, right, obviously now, but somebody that is experienced in our setting, that has cared for seniors. This is something that we take near and dear to us. We have extensive experience in doing this, so we'll rely on the experience of our leadership of our management company to make sure we hire, the most qualified people as possible.
A last question, are you going to transfer anybody from your Denver facilities to be here, or are you going to recruit locally here for your staff?
Oh, all local staff.
All local?
Mm-hmm. Our headquarters is in Denver and there'll be regional support, but all of the community staff will be local staff.
Thank you.
Ms. Villa?
I just want to commend you, and if you have any other information you want to share about your native plantings, because I do feel those have a much livelier vista for the residents with pollinators, et cetera, that follow it. So,
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
and also lower water usage, a little more drought resistant. And then I was wondering if you have an estimated opening date.
Ooh, that's probably a little bit more difficult to start with. It'll probably be about, I'm going to say roughly 2 years from now. We've got to go through the approval process, both with the local jurisdiction, but also at a state level. Obviously, I think as you probably are aware, one of the hardest things is getting through Johnson County wastewater to get through that permit process. So we've got to go through those steps, and then it'll probably be about a 16 to 18 month construction time.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Harrison?
Thank you. I think that the last time you all were here, I only focused or recall the Morningstar name. I'm a stickler for naming, and I don't know if you're aware, but Cornerstone's a pretty popular name in South Johnson County. There's a church a couple of miles away. It's not too late to tweak the name if you want to not be confused with the bank, the insurance company, and the church that are all a few miles away. Just a thought. It's not too early, too
Okay.
late. To tweak the name. Morningstar, just leave it Morningstar. But I hate it when people walk in the doors of my business looking for that other one that they were.
It'll just be Morningstar.
Oh, it won't be Cornerstone?
Correct.
Oh, well, there we go. I'm sorry then. I don't know where I'm getting all the Cornerstone from. Is that,
The master plan development.
gotcha.
Correct.
Okay, well, very good. Morningstar's great. Nobody's going to confuse you with anything else.
Any other comments or questions? I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion from Mr. Azeltine and a second from Ms. Larson. If there are no further comments, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay.
Thank you very much.
It's approved unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Roseman and Mr. Lesniak. Thanks for being here. We'll look forward to it. 12B is a resolution approving a final plan and final plats for East Village Phases 3 and 4, located south of 133rd Street and east of Pawnee Lane. Ms. Bennett?
Thank you, Mayor. I was wrestling with the microphone there. I was visiting with Mark Klein about the opening note about changing stipulation 17, the private streets, and adding the maintenance condition. The LDO defines private streets to include maintenance by the non-governmental entity, so I think this is probably not a necessary change. So staff would withdraw that request.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have the applicant ready to present this evening?
We do. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Move this up a little bit. Thank you. See if I can get our, oh, thank you. Patrick? I'll go ahead and get started while he's getting that up in front of you. Appreciate you all hearing us tonight. My name is Curtis Holland. I'm the attorney for the developer, Rick Odo, who you all know well here. Also would like to introduce Patrick Reuter, who was just here, Henry Clover with Clover Architects, who have been working on this plan with us from the beginning. We also have Dan Foster and Jeff Skidmore from Schlegel Engineering here, if you have any questions about our plan. Again, appreciate you hearing us tonight. Project is very familiar to all of you. We were here, I believe, in January of 2022 when it was ultimately approved for rezoning and a preliminary development plan. Took a number of hearings to accomplish all of that. Lots of changes that were made. And anyway, we were pleased with the outcome there. I know there was some opposition, obviously, to the approval, both in the adjoining residential neighborhood as well as some members of this governing body. But again, ultimately was approved. And so just to kind of bring you forward and remind you, about 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, we were here also on a final plan for phases 1 and 2, which involved the single-family homes and twin villas along 133rd Street. And we had a lot of discussion at that time about the berms was, I know, a hot topic, and some other things. And we worked our way through those issues. And again, the development team did make changes to address these concerns. Again, not everybody was happy, but we ended up getting there. And so we're here tonight to bring forth our next phases of the project, phases 3 and 4. I'm going to turn most of the presentation over to Patrick Reuter for the PowerPoint so he can show you the pretty pictures and what we have planned for the area. I did want to say to you, there are some changes, but they're minor. They're not substantial. They're very minor. And all of the changes that were made were really requests made upon us by staff to do certain things and to improve the project, which we did. There was a couple of changes that I think the mayor and others might like, because when we were here with the preliminary development plan, there was some comment about adding more retail space. And so we've added a little bit more retail space, and so we'll go through that with you. And there was also some commentary about trying to direct the traffic southward to 135th Street. And so we made some of those changes. And there's some other additional changes. We actually have one less unit in this plan than we did when we showed it to you and had it first approved. And then we also want to talk tonight about the enhancements to Chadwick Park and the amenities and the programming for that park that was of interest to everybody. And so we've got more information and detail on that. Again, staff is recommending approval. I think it's been determined that we're in compliance with the preliminary development plan. It was presented to the Planning Commission in July, and they too recommended approval, liked the changes, and found that it was in compliance with the approved preliminary development plan. So we're happy to be here tonight. I know that there's been still is interest from the residents about what we're doing and moving this forward, and from council. I think, though, at this point where we are, we substantially comply with an approved preliminary development plan. So I know that even though there was some opposition on this governing body to the original approval, that you might find it acceptable to move forward with approving a final plan that does comply with your preliminary development plan per your code. So with that, I will turn it over to Patrick, unless you have any specific questions for me, and we'll just do a short presentation of the project.
All right, thank you, Mr. Holland.
Thank you.
Hello, Patrick Reuter, Glover Architects, 8813 Penrose Lane, Lenexa, Kansas, 66219. All right, like Kurt said, we're really excited to be here tonight. Before you is the current approved PDP. Just again to remind everyone where we're at. We're talking about the southwest corner of the project. So overall, current final development plan, previously approved and discussed phases 1 and 2 are highlighted in green. The future phases 5 and 6 on the east are grayed out, and then those are still future phases to be submitted. And we are talking about the 4 mixed-use buildings along 135th and Pawnee, 4 brownstones with commercial, and then also Chadwick Park. So as Kurt mentioned, we've had some very minor changes between the PDP and the FDP. Here is, if it'll go back and not be frozen, a comparison between the PDP and the FDP. There we go. So current approved PDP on the left and proposed FDP on the right. So again, the project plan overall is 100% compliant with the LDO and approved PDP. Overall building setbacks from 133rd and the overall design of the buildings remain consistent and unchanged from the approved PDP. Some of the minor changes include road sizing and access updates for fire and emergency vehicle compliance for road widths. Chadwick Park road sizing is updated from a portion of that as well. We did shift a portion of the building C surface lot that was between B and C over to be between buildings C and F. So that moves it a little bit closer to Chadwick Park in terms of location, and also on the more dense side of building C where the apartments are actually located in that building. And then the final parking stall configuration on the street, we want to call it 134th Street, 134th Terrace, between buildings A and D was also had some slight changes. So some of the other FDP improvements that we want to run through with you that we thought made this project much better than what we had at PDP, since we're always looking to improve of what we had.
Can you go back to the numbered page? I didn't get a chance to back one. Oh,
I'm sorry?
Go back. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say I didn't get a chance to see that one, and I'm not supposed to.
Yeah, no, sorry. It's like lagging or something. I'm not sure what's going on. So overall, the site plan is substantially the same as approved, with one less unit when we finish all the final building layouts. As Kurt mentioned, we increased the overall amount of commercial square footage. That occurred in buildings A and D. So that was additional 4,290 square feet. The original PDP had just under 19,000. So now we are just over 23,200 square feet with this phase of the development. One of the other big improvements was the public park that's adjacent to Building D. The PDP had this park at 3 acres, and we're now up to 3.17. So a few different moves that we made here to get that to happen for the community was to move the pool, which was previously to the east of Building D, and put that on top of the parking deck for Building B. So with that, we're taking what would already been a concrete roof and replacing it with some planters, water, and sidewalk area. And that allowed us to shift over the community garden and dog park next to Building D. So overall, we were able to increase the amount of green space adjacent to that building in the park through that. And then also, the preliminary plan had an access drive for access to the garage in Building D from the north. We have since shifted that to the south. Again, that allows for more contiguous green space, and then also starts to push the traffic that enters into that building away from the single-family homes in our community. And then overall parking for the development per code is required to be 797 stalls. Right now, we're providing 798, of which 80 of those we are showing and proposing to be land banked or deferred stalls. And for now, we're keeping it as temporary green space that increases the amount that we're already over on the project. So typically, we see these projects stabilized on the apartment side at about 1.25 stalls per unit to 1.45. Because ordinance requires 2 stalls per unit, we don't see the need for these stalls right now, but should that need arise, we can go ahead and build them in the future. All right, for the fun part, take you through a few different renderings of this portion of the community, starting at 135th and Chadwick. We're gonna go through, look at the brownstone buildings, get a view of Chadwick Park, the brownstones and retail buildings that are flanking Chadwick specifically, and then we'll go on down to the mixed-use buildings and then take a look at that pool deck. So 135th Street is kind of behind you on the screen, so you're looking north to Chadwick Park beyond. So here you have the 2-story brownstone units on each side, public sidewalk, landscape, sidewalk, and then green space, up to slightly raised porches, patios for those brownstone units. Each brownstone unit is 2 stories and then has a attached 2-car garage in the rear. Here's an aerial view looking over the entry to Chadwick. So we have a proposed signage up front, and then additional landscaping in attempts to block some headlights as people are entering into the development for anyone using that park. And then in the center there is our retail kiosk building that we showed at preliminary, and then beyond it, the park. And then on either side, again, are the 2 brownstones, and you can start to see those restaurant spaces on the south end of either of those buildings. So another view of the park. This starts to kind of show some of the streetscape between the park side itself and the brownstones. And then again, another look at the park itself. So in our retail kiosk building there in the center, that has public restrooms and then a small catering kitchen that faces north, east, and south. And so that can be used depending on an event by anyone that might want to come rent it out, set up, and do whatever they might need for that event. Another view looking down Chadwick, looking north. So again, Chadwick Park on the left of the screen there. We have a 6-foot sidewalk on that side of the park, and we felt that adding that in really helps to allow access to the park for all the residents. And then you can also see we've kind of rendered in some food trucks beyond. I know we talked about that at our PDP. So part of our plan is it has some outlets included along there in some of the parallel stalls so they can access those for that use as well. Moving on to the brownstone side of the street, we have 8-foot planter beds, 8-foot sidewalks, and then again, green space before the raised patios, porches of the brownstone units. And then you can kind of see off to the left a little bit, the patio and railings of the restaurant space. So here's an overall of just kind of zooming in on the park itself. So we heard, from our other meetings that we need to look at some of the additional programming that can happen within this park since it is so massive. So we added in an amphitheater and we bermed around it. And so that way we can have events such as theater in the park or movie night, et cetera. And that leaves the rest of the park open to green space. And so, when you're at the PDP stage and you're looking at this tiny little park on a piece of paper, it's like, oh, that's really tiny. How big is 80,000 square feet? And just to show kind of how large Chadwick Park really is, this is, Arrowhead Stadium overlaid on the park. So you guys could have Mahomes, we could play a little game of pickup, and everyone would love it. So here's a view from 135th and Pawnee, looking at our 4-story mixed-use building. So the bottom level of that is your commercial, so retail, restaurant, office, showing activated trellis on the corner there by the future restaurant tenant. And then this portion has 3 stories of apartments above, and then you can see the 4-story portion beyond. So this building's materials, as well as the brownstones, are either the same materials in terms of the facade that were approved as part of phase 1 and 2, or complementary materials that match what we showed at PDP. So last image here is showing that raised pool deck. And so you can see parking garage below that we've kind of bermed up against. One of the things that we did with this building was take building B and push it into the ground a little bit. And what that allowed us to do, other than just reducing the overall height, Still maintain a public and ADA access from the sidewalk here. So you're able to kind of berm up against the back side of that garage so you can actually walk up. So imagine like you're just walking up a ramp to like a split level home. And so the nice thing about that is it allows the single family homes that are part of our community to access that pool so they can come park right next to it and then walk in from that side while also still maintaining access from the apartment users on the other side. So with that, we did increase the pool size a little bit to account for what we see those additional residents being, and overall the amenities of the pool remain the same with fire pits, grills, seating, and some of the trellis areas. And with that, we are, again, very excited to be here and get this phase of the development moving and are open to any questions.
Okay, very nice improvements. I know you say you listened to our staff, but I think you heard from our residents also, because a lot of those things they had requested. So,
Yes.
thank you. Questions for Mr. Reuter? Ms. Harrison?
You said that you increased the size of the pool. And that was one of the last pictures that we saw. What are the dimensions roughly of the pool? Gallons won't mean anything, I don't think, to most of us, but what's the length and the width of that pool?
I do not actually remember off the top of my head, but I know it does take up a majority of that portion of the deck. I can look at a plan and get back with you if I flip
I'm just
through
trying to
after this.
envision, since this is available as the neighborhood pool for upwards of 3,000 residents when you're at capacity, is that about right?
I don't think it's going to be 3,000. It's the single-family homes that are part of the East Village and then the apartment residents. So I think if we're at 327 units, that's probably about 600 to 700 people.
Not even that much. If I can address that one, Rick Odo, president and owner of Odo Development, 15200 West 105th Terrace. The pool is designed for half of just the apartments and just the single family.
Phases 1, 2, 3, and 4?
Phases, no.
3 and 4.
3, it'll be phases 3 and the single family of phase 1. The phase 1 of the twin villas and the first 2 brownstones we have will be part of we use the pool over in phase 2. So we have 2 pools. Second, even though we have capacity to have 2 units or 2.5 people per unit at the 700 people in an apartment community, we typically see 1.1, 1.2 is on the high side. So we're looking at more like 450. And this pool is about 40% larger than most of the pools we have to handle the extra 100 people that we would have. So as someone who builds a lot of these things, and we do keep getting them bigger because everybody loves the pools, we did make this one about 50% bigger than any of our other developments because we'll have about 150 people more to the community.
I understand that one of the biggest complaints that I've heard about apartments in the area is that the pools are just so small that if there's more than 20 people there, it's a problem. And so with such a large development, and unless you're going to keep people at the door, I'm sorry, you live in the other phase, you have to go use the other pool. I mean, there's going to be back and forth, and people have friends over to use pools, so it's a draw.
We limit the friends to 1 person, so we do that. And
with lifeguards or staff?
We don't have lifeguards.
So how is that monitored?
Pool. It's a community pool like any other community pool. It's 4 feet deep, so therefore we don't need.
Right, I'm just wondering how you limit the number of people, guests per.
We do monitor it. We do monitor it regularly. We have to, otherwise it gets out of control, like you said.
Right, no, that's what I'm reading online is about.
This pool is over twice the size of the one I had at Villa Milano, just to tell you size-wise. So we feel if Villa Milano has 300 and or so apartment homes, and this has 324, to double the size, it'll easily pick up the additional single-family and brownstones.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, Ms. Larson?
Just a couple of questions. Could you point out where the 80 banked parking spots are?
Of course. Go back to a map real quick. So I think this diagram might be a little easier to see them since they are dashed in. So I'll just go west to east here. So there's several spots right here. Oh, gosh dang it. North of Building A. There we go. Right here, north of Building A, just to the south side of the park, right here. And then there's some additional land bank stalls on the side of the brownstone here between that and the single-family home. And then there's a few stalls that we increased the size of our landscape islands by this one brownstone down here.
Thank you. And then my other question, for the ownership of the brownstones, what do you expect the price point to be?
About $550,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Sippel.
Thank you.
Is your microphone on, sir?
Thank you. I like your rendition of the Chadwick Park. I think that's going to be very nice. What I'm concerned about is the number of parking slots alongside Chadwick Park. And the question is, if you have an event and you have a food truck, how many cars are you going to have parking spots available there? It just seems like you could be, people are going to be cruising around trying to find a spot if there's going to be 100 people at an event in the park.
Yeah, so we designed as many parallel stalls along both sides of Chadwick on either side of the park that would physically fit. And the rest of the community,
What's that number of parallel parking spots? I didn't mean for you to count them. I thought that might be something.
I would say probably there's about 12 per side or 13 per side, so I'd say probably 52 approximately.
50, okay.
Yeah, well, 50 to 55, somewhere in there. And so because the overall community is cross-parked and there is parking adjacent that we still don't feel that we need, while we've still land banked 80 stalls, that's still above, even if you went back into the math of, we're not down to 1.45 per unit, we're probably still at like 1.6, 1.7. So we feel that the additional stalls, by moving this parking lot by the brownstone over, and then the remainder of the stalls that are in phases 3 and 4, and also the same amount of stalls in phase 2 that was approved, that we don't feel that we're going to be using 100% of. We feel that around the entire community we have that access. And then also as part of phase 1, which is just off the screen here, we ended up removing a single family home, I think at the time of PDP, and had a full, I believe it is 16-foot wide walking path that goes up to the 133rd Street. That was part of phase 1. So, a big portion of the mixed-use community and the overall idea behind this is to create walkability. And so when we did that originally as part of phase 1, we're also hoping that anyone from the north neighborhoods is also going to be able to walk to this, and so hopefully eliminate the need for as many cars as you possibly could with that.
Do you anticipate many residents using the parallel parking around the park?
I would hope that it gets utilized, since it's going to be, right next to all the activity. I would imagine that, everyone in part of the community would probably use that.
I'm anxious about that. That's just one of my concerns. Will non-residents be able to use that park?
Yes, it is public.
Can they reserve the park for a function?
I believe so.
And then the question is, who do they go to get permission to book a time and a day?
We are hoping to have an activities director to help us with this, and kind of like some of the other communities that have regular events coming through. And so if we have an art fair or something like that, someone wants to do one, they would book it through us and set something up. We really aren't going to encourage that type of environment. We feel that with the 50 stalls around Chadwick, and plus I want to stress that we have additional parking behind this brownstone, this whole area up here, and parking, what now? Yeah, in Meadowbrook, like they bus people. So we have a retail over on the far east end, I do know that the owners of the Price Chopper, and working with them, that we could park there if we need to, if it really had something big. There is plenty of parking that's allowed, just like Meadowbrook does in the residential area. We will try to discourage as much as possible, and I'm saying our own, but that's part of being in a mixed use. That happens. And we definitely want people from the outside to come in.
Right. I don't think we're going to allow parking on 133rd Street.
I didn't say that one. I'm talking about 133rd Terrace, our private street.
Okay.
That's within our own
And
development.
then over by Price Chopper.
Yes.
Okay.
And then also our east side of the community over on State Line side as well.
Thank you for that. One
Yes.
last question. What is the distance between the foundation of those high-rise 4 stories at Pawnee and 135th Street? What's the distance between the bottom of that building and
But, I'm sorry, what
and
dimension were you looking for
135th
again? What was the dimension?
Well, the buildings, the 4 tall buildings, they're very close to 135th Street. What is that distance between the foundation of that building, the bricks, and where the cars are?
So from the right-of-way, we are set back 30 feet, and I believe the right-of-way appears to be about 20 to 25 feet to the curb line, so
And
I'd say
those
about
are-
50 to
those are-
55.
Any soundproofing or anything you're doing for the tenants? I live 3/4 of a mile south of 135th Street, and all night long you can hear cars and motorcycles and so forth. It's going to be very noisy for those tenants. I just wondered if you had anything in mind to soundproof those ones that side up to 135th Street.
Yeah, and so, part of what we do going through these buildings is, again, looking at soundproofing between, unit to unit, and then unit to corridor and unit to outside. So majority of, the materials of the building being, either siding or brick, and that wall composite is pretty good at sound. And then obviously it's, your patio windows and doors that are your, biggest culprits of letting sound in. So as we go through this and analyze the noise, there are different window types that we will be, looking into to see what's appropriate, and there's different ones that are better at mitigating sound than others. We haven't selected a specific manufacturer at this time, but that's what you would really look into in order to actually get some good mitigation of sound.
Thank you.
Ms. Phila.
I was just wondering if you could provide some more details on landscaping, because the drawings we get, I could never read that.
Yeah, might ask our landscape architect to come up and go through some of that.
It looks like you're going to be spending a lot of money on landscaping here. It looks very lush.
Dan Foster with Schlegel, landscape architect there. So first of all, obviously we'll meet all the Leawood City Code, which is pretty extensive in terms of trees, number of shrubs, that type of thing. And then in addition to that, we have provided additional shrubs along all of the street frontages in addition to what's required on the code. And there are also additional trees. I don't remember what the exact numbers were off the landscape plan, but there was at least several, 100 that were in addition to what was required above the code.
So I guess my concern is not the quantity, but the type. So that in essence, looking at bushes that encourage, like there's a spice bush that's what blue swallowtail butterflies lay there. So not just using the standard things that we do, but continuing to put in natives so that we have life in our shrubbery, and we're also much more resilient in hot weather.
Yeah, a lot of the ones that we're using are considered, a lot of the trees are natives or oaks and maples and that type of thing. Shrub-wise is a little bit of a mix between, the kind of ornamental, what I call ornamental, because one of the challenges that we have right now is just availability of things, because there's so much going on, and with the size of the plant material that is required in the city code, it makes it really hard for us to, really select, have a wide range to select from. But we do have a variety of like butterfly bush and some other flowering that do attract pollinators and that type of thing. And we try to put those in areas that are not adjacent to where residents might be, just so there's not a conflict between like bees and someone sitting on their patio or that type of thing. But We will have a mix of flowering that attract those, and then we'll have some ornamental types of things as well.
I would just encourage the staff to try to work with you to give you more leniency in putting in that. And I can really tell you from experience, the bees don't care at all about us. We have absolutely nothing to give them. They're looking for pollen, and I have none. So unless you're going to go and pinch their little tails and make them mad, they do not bother us. But more natives would be appreciated.
Sure.
Ms. Kane.
Yes, I was reading in the Planning Commission notes, the write-in, write-out was, if I'm understanding this correctly, was left in for the city council to be a final decider. And can you speak to that, please? Because as it says in the meeting minutes, I think, and the residents were saying over and over, alleviating any traffic along 133rd that's possible, and forcing it in and out on 135th would be preferential to them. So can you tell us what the outcome of that is?
Yeah, actually, we didn't bring it up in our presentation. I know we talked about it in Planning Commission meeting, but we're no longer proposing changing what we have on the plan. So we're still currently proposing the write-in and write-out, and so that was a stipulation of the Public Works that we were questioning at Planning Commission, but then on further discussion and hearing what Planning Commission had to say, where they did leave it to you to decide if you actually did want to take it out. We just didn't want to go down that route because we think it is still an asset. So we're no longer looking at that.
So I see Mark Klein is here, but as opposed to David Lay, but it's my understanding that ultimately 135th Street through there will be 3 lanes and 3 lanes. Plus, if there's a right-in, right-out, does that mean right there at Chadwick at least, or certain parts of 135th Street? Speaking to Chuck's comment about the level of traffic, so there's going to be portions of 133rd or 135th Street rather that are 4 lanes wide, as opposed to not just 3. 3 is a lot, but as opposed to 3.
They will have the extra lane as far as the 3rd lane, and then I believe that there's also, as far as decel and excel lanes that are located in there, that for those portions will be 4 lanes. With regard to the right-in, right-out that we were talking about, it's actually right in between as far as buildings B and C. And
Do you still have the diagram up there? Because it's gone off of our screen.
That's what I was just going to say. Can we see that,
You look
please?
like you're looking at it, but we don't see it anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, sorry.
thank you.
Yeah, so right, yeah, here. I guess that's the PDP right here.
So there's going to be a right-in and right-out between B and C, and what about F and G? There's a right-in, right-out there as well?
That's F and G is a full 4-turn intersection.
Well, that's
Sorry?
perfect signal.
It's a full intersection at Chadwick. So yes, right in,
that's a
right out, left in, left out. It's a full stoplight.
Signalized.
Sorry.
So right there at 4, that will be 4 lanes wide on the, well, it would be eastbound or westbound on that side of the street. So that's 4 lanes there, and then, that 4th lane would go all the way from F probably to be between B and G. It's not going to fall off in between there, or is it?
I think it's expanded to 3 lanes, and the 4th lane is just the decel and acceleration, which I believe are approximately 150 feet long each, if memory serves. So I think the decel starts, I think, between where C and F would be, and then an accel that would go to probably the end of building B, if my math is correct.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because that was, traffic, as you well know, for
Yes.
14 meetings was paramount with the residents, so I'm happy to see that. I too am concerned about the parking around Chadwick Park. And then land banking, the 80 spots. I just voiced my concern there. I would like to say this is a separate matter, but me and a whole bunch of other people walk up and down 133rd Street to State Line Road all the time. So I would like to thank you for finally cleaning up your sidewalks on the south side of the street, because they've been really bad on 133rd Street all the way up to State Line Road and all along State Line Road from 133rd to 135th, which is also Odo land. So thank you for finally cleaning that up, because they were almost impassable. So I hope during construction that will be, because it is a highly walked path already, without the 2,500 people that are going to be there, moving there as well. So thank you for the right in, right out. I'm happy to read again that the brownstones are going to be owned. I know the ship has sailed, but I still have an issue with the location of the four-story buildings. I said from the very beginning, I thought those should be closer to Kenneth Road, State Line Road. So I remain opposed to where those are located, because I think along Pawnee and along 135th Street, a lot of this beautiful stuff with Chadwick Park and stuff is going to be not visible behind those four-story buildings at all. That's my opinion, but I could be wrong there. I do like that you moved the pool to the top of Building B. I think that, and increase the green space, I think that's a good resolution, and I guess that's all I have for right now. But I did want to follow up, like you said, or like I said, on that right in, right out. So I'm glad that you weren't trying to monkey around with that at this state. So thank you for that. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
And Mr. Reuter, you maybe don't know the answer to this, but someone might. I know our staff is big on bike racks, and we're talking about parking spaces and people walking, but we do have throughout the development bike racks, correct?
Correct. And then within each of the multifamily buildings, specifically A, B, C, and D, typically one of the amenities we have is bike storage, and that might be in the garage or somewhere else within that building too, on the ground level. So,
Okay, great.
so it's secured.
Great, thank you. I'd like to hear from the residents. Ms. Fella, if you have one more
I
comment.
was just going to follow up on that in terms of, I wanted to say I appreciate the deferral of the parking to leave that green space until it's needed, but to, again, emphasize that, I think more people are going to be on electric bikes, et cetera, so it's not just a bike rack, it's starting to become
Stations.
mopeds. It's like, taking car space, and how many could you put into that if you start to change that profile?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, if that mode of transportation in this area starts to increase, definitely something we'll want to come back and make sure we, add in where applicable, especially around the park.
Yeah, great.
We can certainly have more council discussion after we hear from the residents, but Ms. Harrison, you want to say something first?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just waiting until we got through the line, but I'm going to be the third person to bring up parking, which means that it's on top of mind for several of us and maybe others. I've never heard the term land banked parking spaces before, and so if I think I read slides and read my notes correctly, we require 797 spaces. You're providing 798. Well, sort of, not really, because 80 of them are land banks, so you're really going to build 718?
At this stage, correct.
Okay, so, and I'm sorry, Deb, I disagree. I want those built now. I don't want to have to fight in 5 years about there not being enough parking. Well, in whose opinion? Because you've heard me complain about parking. I go to so many places, the Peaks in Lenexa, Mission Farms. Oh, I'd love to have dinner or get a pedicure, but I can't find a parking space. I can't go to the Red Door Grill at such and such a development because there's nowhere to park at 6:00 p.m. I can go 9 stores over, and they all have these cute little signs that say, these 2 spots are only for Smoothie King, and these 3 spots are only for Mr. Euros, and these 3 spots are only for Fairway Optical. So I can't park there. And so I think that if you're going to have all these great amenities and this great park, and you're going to have luxury townhomes, I think, and people are going to entertain in these beautiful places and these green spaces and these fire pits, I think we need the parking and not have to have people fight about it in 5 years after they've moved in, complained, and now who do we go to get you to turn those? Who's going to remember that those were land banked? I feel like that's a mess waiting to happen. So my preference would be that they be created at the beginning. I also noticed in the drawings parallel parking, and I'm laughing over here because I did not pass that part of my driver's license exam, and I cannot cannot parallel park a car. So if there aren't 2 spaces available, I can't park there because I have to drive in straight. It's a blessing and a curse. I don't have any, funny scuff marks on my car because I can't park there. But there's an entire shopping development over there, and we all know what I'm talking about. I'm over in the parking garage because I can't parallel park. And so you have these drawings where there's all this parallel parking. It's lovely, but you can't fit as many cars in those situations. My third and final concern about parking is looking at this drawing where people are coming in off of 135th Street, where the speed limit is 45 miles an hour, and they're pulling in between buildings B and C, where people are, well, maybe trying to back out of their car, their spot. And I am envisioning Chief Finger's folks being over there regularly for the fender benders that are happening because people are pulling in quickly and somebody's trying to pull out. That seems to be a very tight little spot right there in terms of accidents waiting to happen. But I'm not a traffic engineer, but I would never want to park there and try to pull out, hoping somebody doesn't zip in. So those are my parking concerns.
Can I address those, please?
Sure.
So, Councilman Henderson, you brought up, I'm going to start backwards on this drive right in and right out into C and B. It was asked for us to put it there because people felt that it would relieve traffic on 133rd. We asked to remove it because our traffic study shows it has zero effect on 133rd for a lot of reasons. For the right in. We have to have the right out for emergency purposes.
Oh, I want you to have entry and exits. I'm just not sure parking right there is very safe.
Okay.
I want the entrance in and out of there. That's not my concern.
Once you put the 90-degree turn in there, they almost come to a stop, and and I'm not opposed to putting a speed bump or something like that, if you'd like, coming in to make sure they slow up, which would not be an all bad idea to do. As far as the parking, we find that we're about 1.1 to 1.2 cars per apartment, yet we're designing it for 2. So that's why we feel like we've got about 300 some odd extra, on this side only, we've got about, all the single families will have them. The twin villas all have a 2-car garage, so they're all covered. But the apartments have we felt like it's like 250 extra stalls that they would be used for these when Chadwick is filled up. And that's why we moved more parking over here by F, so it's close to to Chadwick. And we also put it behind I, also close to Chadwick. And we have we do have a few right here close to the retail as well. Now, we have this whole bank along here that we can always fill in if asked. And if we see that we're doing it, I'm in a commercial development where I can easily add it. They're not expensive to add. We just felt that green space is more important because you can't recoup it later. But we'd much rather have the green space up front. If we have a need for it, it's not a cost issue. It just, we'll be happy to put it in. And we'll see it from our own customers. They'll ask us for it. And this happens in a lot of our developments where we deliberately put spaces in, and then we go back and put it in here and here, but we didn't need that one over there for whatever reasons. So we feel like we've got that well addressed for the land banking. It's very common on these type of things. And plus we have additional parking for all of our retail through here. So we feel like that retail is all well covered along in front of D and A and D.
I think, like Rick mentioned, similar to your concern, we equally do not want an underparked development. You're going, like you said, going to Red Door. If somewhere and there's nowhere to park, you're going to another restaurant, and we don't want anything to hurt the economics or viability of this community. So I think we're just as conscious as you.
Right, I understand that. But I mean, drive around Leawood. People have 3-car garages, and they still have cars parked in their driveway and on the street. The kids come home from college, and there's 4 cars parked in the street in front of one house. I mean, if you're 1.2 cars per apartment complex, what's a 0.2 car? I mean, I know.
Because a few people do have 2 cars, but I mean, once again, we have about 1.2 people per unit in these things. So we don't have very, very few two people.
Married couples aren't living in your complexes?
We have very few of them. It's just not the norm here. The higher end apartments are when they start getting married and having kids, they go to the single family, or they go to homes.
Could I ask Mr. Klein to address how we've handled that, because you're going to administratively be involved in the process of calling back the developer to develop additional parking as complaints. So I'm sure it's happened before. There's been land banking, and can you give us any history and perspective of how the city handles that?
You know, land banking is actually something that we encourage if we can, and we've used it a while ago. When I first got here, it was something that we took a look at, and part of the reason, if you look at some of the office buildings along Town Center Parkway, they had all that parking lot there that doesn't really get used, and so the idea is that you will actually have that as green space, and for the large part, I think most of them kind of stay as far as green space. But with this stipulation, it would allow us to go in and require that they put in the parking. And that's kind of the reason why we have that stipulation in there. But actually, staff actually encouraged them to try and do some land banking, since they said that they wouldn't have the need for those parking spaces, and we didn't really want them to put in the parking spaces if they didn't need it, because you have more runoff, you have more heat island, you have a lot of different, so.
But it isn't.
Joni Mitchell in the background.
It isn't a mother may I, you know, I mean, you are in charge, you will tell them when they hit that
Correct.
limit. So it isn't as if we have to ask, please, would you put in the parking? It is a requirement for them to put it in. But nobody ever comes up with the money to take it out once it's in, because Town Center sat there for how long? Ward Parkway sat there for how long as an asphalt island, and no one used it, and it never comes back up. Look at all the you know, gas stations that sit on the corner and just sit there and sit there and sit there.
I do know that land banking was popular and has been popular in years past, probably prior to you coming on. And I don't recall our staff ever coming to us and telling us there was a problem.
I can't recall of where we actually had to have put it back in.
Glad to hear
Right.
that.
Mr. Osmond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to just bring up real quick, although it's not in the city of Leawood, but Mission Farms on the Overland Park side. Prime example with the land bank right there. You have Martin City Brewing Company that prior to them, they had another restaurant. That restaurant did not need the extra parking. So the developer did not put in the parking lot right there. Once Martin City came in, they installed the parking lot for that area that was needed at the time. And as Deborah said, it's a catch-22. We either can have a sea of parking and asphalt, or we could have green space right now. I would prefer the green space, and it's actually more expensive to have the developer come back in after the fact from a cost standpoint than to do it right all up front. So he's actually spending more money later on to get green space. So I don't have a problem with this. And on the B and C with the right in, right out, that's a decel lane. And unless you're going 35 miles an hour and whipping around the corner, it's highly unlikely. People are going to slowly come in and out. But I do like Mr. Odo's proposal that in the event that there is an issue, you put in a speed bump. And no one likes a speed bump, but that might be an area that you might need one. So kudos on that. And, you know, on that note, I'd love to hear from the residents. So,
Well, and we can have more council discussion after the residents. So we only have two that actually signed in to speak this evening. Thank you, Mr. Reuter.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm going to call on you in the order you signed in and ask if you come forward and state your name and address for the record, please. Rachel Rubin.
Hello, Rachel Rubin, 3105 West 132nd Street. I just have a couple of comments. I think in the Planning Commission meeting, it was said that they didn't hear complaints from residents about East Village. They didn't, you know, people didn't write in, didn't give comments, and they were saying that was persuasive to them as far as voting in favor of the final plans. And I just want to say the reason people aren't writing in is because they're very discouraged. We wrote in before, Again, so many letters, so many emails, we had petitions, et cetera, and people felt like our concerns were not listened to as far as how people voted on the council. So I think that is why people are not writing in. There is preliminary approval for phases 3 and 4, we know that. So I think people are just spending their time on other things that they feel like they can control or have more input in. So I don't want you to think because people haven't written you that means that people don't care or that people are all of a sudden now supporting the project, because that is not the case, in my opinion. I have some specific questions. I know I'm not allowed to get answers directly, but maybe one of you can follow up on my questions. On page 4 of, I guess, the agenda, it talks about 2 stipulations that were changed, and I would like more information on why the solar panels were taken off all the apartment buildings and only now are on the 4-story apartment buildings. And maybe there's a good reason for that, but that's stipulation number 6. So that looks like it was changed. And then stipulation number 17 was also changed, that the downspouts were to be enclosed, and now that's not a requirement. I would like to know why that changed as well. So again, number 6 and number 17, why were those changed? I think we all wanted the solar panels, so I'm just concerned why they were taken off of the lower buildings. And then on page 6, when it talks about the green space, and the green space decreased by 4.8% in phases 3 and 4, and then at the bottom of that paragraph, it says, per the applicant, the amount of open space in phases 1 through 4 has increased from 1,215,767 to 1,380,999, a difference of 165,232 square feet. I'm curious if the staff has verified that. Per the applicant, do we know, is that true? Has staff actually verified that? One thing I've had an issue with, as far as the percentage change, I know we can only, you can have up to a 5% change with no consequence to the final, from preliminary to final. But when you add up all the different changes, I don't think they should be looked at in a vacuum or looked at each individual change. I think you can look at all of the changes and see if it's over a 5% change. So here, phases 3 to 4, obviously it's 4.8, that's below the 5%, but I would still like to know if staff verified the alleged increase in open space on 1 to 4, and then just a comment that I think we should look at all the changes collectively and not individually when you're looking at that 5%. So again, residents are still opposed to this project. I think you've asked really good questions. I hope we get answers. And whatever they say in this meeting, it's really not enforceable. What's enforceable is in the documents. So if you're not satisfied with what is in the documents, then I hope that you'll vote no or vote to postpone the vote until a later time. But whatever is said doesn't really impact what gets passed or what is opposed. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Rubin. Steve Durer, and your address is not written down, so if you could state that slowly, please. Thank you.
Steve Durer, 2211 West 132nd Street.
2211?
2211 West 132nd Street.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to address the bike walking trail around Cornerstone Church. The west and south portions of the trail were included in phases 1 and 2. Completing the eastern portion, or eastern loop of the bike trail, should be a required element for approval of phases 3 and 4. In February, you asked for community input. This was the one feature of this development that every neighborhood representative agreed would benefit the entire area. It will attract walkers who will otherwise go to Geezer Park, which can already get overcrowded. It will provide cyclists and pedestrians direct access to the Kenneth Crosswalk at 135th Street. With Regents Park development having bike lanes on 137th, the Kenneth and Chadwick crossings will become very attractive to bikers wanting to get between 133rd and 137th. Now is the time to build the bike walk path, not later. It is integral to the entire development. If it is not complete, it won't be used. The eastern segment was brought up in phases 1 and 2 when phases 1 and 2 were approved. Mr. Odo argued that it would require excessive grading interfering with phases 5 and 6. If you look at the plans, the path lies entirely within the natural area that is supposed to be preserved. The only grading required would be for the pathway itself. For reference, look at the existing bike walk trails in Leawood. If you're going to approve all of the residential buildings, then now is the time to approve all the amenities for all Leawood residents. This path was repeatedly pointed out as one of the attractive things to get this development passed originally. There are no guarantees that phases 5 and 6 will ever be completed. Don't leave the bike walk trail half finished. Give this to the people of Leawood. One last note. At the July 25th Planning Commission meeting, Commissioner Coleman referenced the absence of public emails. This even got on the Kansas City Star the next day. He ended by stating, "I'm trusting that this phase is a good sign that the neighbors are more appreciative of this." Chairman Elkins replied, "Or at least less opposed. I found these comments to be extremely out of touch and extremely disrespectful to the residents who are so invested in this process for so long. I'm trusting this council will not go there tonight." Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Durr. There were a number of questions. That concludes our citizens who signed in to speak. A number of questions posed, and I'm wondering if Mr. Klein, you might like to answer the ones about the stipulations. And I think the first was maybe on page 4, the change on stipulation 6 from 2, and then the one about stipulation 17.
And the one as far as on the stipulation with regard to solar, we still want the solar on these 4 stories that are located there. It doesn't mean that this phase does not include as far as the mansion style that we already approved. And I believe that the brownstones, they actually indicated that they wanted to have kind of rooftop decks that I don't know that they were really proposing as far as the solar panels on those. So we believe that this is pretty much in line with what was stated before. Again, we do want those solar panels if possible. The way that the stipulation reads is that they'll put in the conduits and they'll put in the infrastructure that the solar panels can be added, which is pretty much the same as what was at the time of preliminary plan.
Okay, thank you. What about stipulation 17?
Stipulation,
That was downspouts regarding them being from all enclosed to now removed.
and stipulation 17, basically internalizing downspouts isn't part of the Leawood Development Ordinance. It's been a stipulation that we've always had, kind of a standard stipulation that's in there. We did have a work session with the Planning Commission at one point indicating as far as that it wasn't included and did they want us to still include that stipulation in. They indicated that yes, they did want us to include the stipulation in because they wanted the ability to take a look at the individual buildings, and they kind of indicated that if it had more of a residential feel, they might be more comfortable as far as allowing the downspouts on the outside. However, they wanted to make that choice, and so that's the reason why the stipulation was originally in and the Planning Commission removed.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kane?
Mr. Klein, I believe the solar panel whole concept came from Deb Phillip spearheading that. Nobody's ever saying solar panels are going to be installed. They're just being required for the infrastructure there.
Correct.
And if Mr. Odo has solar panels on any of his other developments around town, I'm not aware of any. would be interested in the answer. But I want this body to not to think there's solar panels that may ever go up there. It's just going to be plumbed as well for that. And that was as a result of what one thing, the same with the electrical outlets. So I just think that's almost a misnomer. You know, yes, it'll be wired, the conduit will be there, but for anybody to think that there'll be solar panels ever in this development is not, nobody's ever promised them. The developer has never promised them.
And you're correct, the stipulation is to make it solar ready, and with the
Right.
conduits, it's not to put the solar panels on.
Right, so that was a concession, that was a bone that was thrown our way to satisfy some people, but all that means is it's going to be wired. It's never promised to be coming in part of the active electrical, needs. So, thank you.
And then, Mr. Klein, on page 6, the comments about the amount of green space increasing from 1,215,000, et cetera, to 1,380,000, et cetera, has that been validated? That was the question.
It is the reason why that the green space changed in the phasing is that a portion of the green space that was originally kind of in this phase but got converted into the first and second phase. And so we actually kind of raked them over the coal a little bit, and we had multiple meetings with regard to now it's changed and we're looking at this phase, so we want to know what that percentage change is, and that's where the 4.8% came from. And the applicant might be able to speak more and kind of show you as far as the area that was just to the north. It's kind of where the detention pond and that area around that is the north of these 4 stories where the phasing kind of changed in that area. So they are providing more green space. However, their phasing shifted lines a little bit, and that got them in trouble a little bit. And so we did have multiple meetings with them with regard to try and verify that.
Thank you. And Mr. Durr's comments regarding the east side of the church, the bike walk path, I don't know if that's better for the developer to respond to that. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, they're actually kind of showing it in the future phase as far as 5 and 6 as it kind of comes down, and I do understand as far as where that will complete the loop. We would expect as far as the ones that are shown within the first and second phase and the third and fourth phase to be there, but they were showing that as a future phase, but the applicant might be able to better answer that question.
What are we talking time-wise for 5 and 6?
That probably better for the applicant.
Will have to,
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Hazeltine?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Klein, when Mr. Holland was making his presentation earlier, he made several aversions to this plan, this final plan being in substantial compliance with the preliminary. Is that your opinion?
Yes, we did take a hard look at that.
Thank you.
Ms. Harrison?
I had a conversation with Mr. Klein before the meeting just to clarify something that I've had conversations with about several of my neighbors, and kind of based on some of the conversations and the questions asked from residents, I feel like it's worthy to share because it's a fact and it's a good reminder. I asked Mr. Klein, once a final plan is approved, how long until they have to break ground? Because I was thinking a year or maybe 2 or maybe 3, and I was surprised that it was 10 years. And so I say that to Mr. Durr and to Ms. Rubin, who came in this evening to talk, and to the dozen or so who might be watching, or anybody else. Just fact of point, it is what it is, but that's standard operating procedure. That is not unique to Leawood, I understand. But this could be going on for a while before anything is started and completed. And things may change again, with the demand in the market. Would that be fair to say, Mr. Klein?
They always have the ability to come back to the Planning Commission and City Council.
We've all seen developments in the area start with great gusto and then sort of stall out. And you wonder, well, what about those 15 empty lots? What about that? What happens? Well, this could take some time. This is a bigger development than Leawood has seen in our lifetimes. And it could take a long time before that bike path, I'm sorry, Mr. Durr, is ever completed because it's in phases 5 and 6, and that is further down the pipeline. So I just think that's helpful to remember.
And as I recall, Mr. Klein helped me with this, but I believe it was the state legislature that gave us 10 years. We always had 5.
Which I was amazed it would be
And-
even 5. So yeah, out of our control.
They're correct.
Right.
Out of our control. But I feel it's helpful for people who may not be aware, who aren't a part of the planning process or the world of construction, lay people, to understand nothing is going to happen quickly.
Ms. Villa?
I'm appreciative of Mr. Durr bringing up the bike path, because I would concur that I would like to have that all done at the same time. Do you have any thoughts, Mark, to share about the feasibility of doing that, to the point that Mr. Kerr suggested that it isn't a major landscaping elevation issue because of where it's located?
I would say it does appear, as far as tends to be in a more natural area that's located there, and there is a distance from the buildings that are located, so it may be possible, but the developer is actually the one who would be able to best tell you if he feels that it's something that could be put in now.
So if we were all very interested in having that, I would love to hear the answer.
Why don't we ask the developer to speak
Yes.
to that?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, ask me the question again, because I was talking with my attorney about some of this stuff here.
So I think that there's kind of interest in our part, at least mine, to support that idea of having a completed bike. And I asked about that during the preliminary, and knowing how, with this thought process, is with all the residential, the time to have the bike path in its entirety completed, what would you have to say? Because I would like to put that in as a stipulation. What hardship would it present if you had to include the entire, both sides of the circle for the bike path?
And do it with Phase 4?
The one you're bringing in tonight, or whenever you start the bike path?
I'm okay with doing it with Phase 3 and 4. When we
Great.
start with those, we'll guarantee to do it. There's a very good chance that I'll have Phases 5 done before 3 and 4 start, so it becomes a moot point to me.
Okay.
As well, but I would do it either way. I just need to have some structure, some income coming in, and doing some major construction, and we're happy to do
So
something
you're
like
okay
that.
with including as a stipulation that the bike path all be done in one continuous time? Wherever you put it into, once you start it, you finish it?
Yes, I know what she's saying, is that it's, you're not saying put it in with 3 and 4 that I'm here, but when I start Phase 2, and I start putting it in with Phase 2, I'll do that for you.
That'd be great.
But there's going to be areas that I won't be able to complete, will be the problem, because grading, storms, streets, sanitaries, and utilities coming through, and I'm real concerned about that part. The parts that the resident was talking about, the majority of it I can put in, but I'm still going to have large, several hundred feet that I won't be able to connect.
So again,
because
you're
of that.
looking at something that's gone away for us,
Do
I
what?
think. Whatever, are you pointing to a screen?
Oh,
Yeah, it goes away for us, and so we
Okay.
can't keep
so
up with you.
I can put the majority in from like here all the way down to about there. But the area right through here becomes very difficult, and across here, well, this part I'll have to put in. I have to put in. It's just right through here, I'm gonna have a little bit of about 100 feet. I may not be able to connect. I will do what I can. I'm just afraid to commit to something I don't know because of that 100 feet.
And because, with Phase 5 and 6, as Rick was mentioning, we're
Mr.
very-
Ruda, could you talk into the mic
yes,
more,
sorry.
please?
Yeah, with Phase 5 and 6, again, there have been some minor tweaks to plans, and, installing any sort of bike path along there, we're worried might conflict with any future buildings along that side. The bike path that is shown in, the green was a part of, approved as part of the phase 1 and 2 development will be built now. But to Rick's point, in terms of getting it installed, depending on what actually happens over on that side of the development is unknown. And we are excited that we're hopefully going to have some stuff for phase 5 here before you guys shortly. Not tonight yet, but.
What I'd really like to do is, if you don't mind, is if I can have the final approval of phase 5 given, then I know where things are, and that street, that sidewalk will be built. So as long as I have final approval of 5, which I hope to do shortly, and I've started on 2, I'll put it in with 2. If that's not too convoluted of a thing, but that's my intention.
That really doesn't give us any assurance in a stipulation that says when you begin the trail, that you will complete it. And I'm okay with acknowledging that there may be a section that has to be gravelled or whatever because you can't complete it because of the undergrounding that's necessary. So if we come up with that kind of compromise, because otherwise people will, if you did everything but that last 100 yards, the bikers are going to create their own path. All right.
If we could table
Well,
that stipulation.
didn't he say that the light green was going to go, he
That's
was going to
going in
go
with-
in, and it's this yellow one
Right.
that won't be
The only
going
piece
in?
that we don't know yet is the one that goes
Right.
through 5
Yeah,
and 6.
so
Green is approved.
they'll get a connection from 133rd. It's just the second connection that they may not get, right?
Right away.
That's correct.
But I'm hearing a commitment when
Right.
he comes in with 5, that
Yeah.
there will,
Yeah,
But if
so
five-
you could have that.
Right, but we don't know when
language.
5's coming in.
Well, he
So-
said shortly. Yeah, so you could put a stipulation in regarding phase 5 if you wanted to. Yeah, yeah.
but we're not here in 5 tonight.
No, I know, but she would put it in with 3 and 4 and just comment that when that comes. Ms. Harrison?
All of this talk about these future phases has made me wonder also about another bit of information that might be helpful to know. I'm working in a very linear way. We approved phase 1 and 2. Now we might approve 3 and 4. And we're talking theoretically about 5 and 6. Are these going to be built phase 1 first, phase 2 second, then phase 3? Or is the plan to start with phase 5, for all I know?
We are starting with phase 1. We're in for building permits now for phase 1. I should be getting them shortly. Phases, and I said all along through this process, 5 and 6 are very independent
Yep.
of 3 and 2. It first started off because I didn't have access to, I didn't own it. Because to make things easy, I just went and bought the whole site. So 5 and 6, as soon as I get enough retailers over there, which I've got several LOIs, but then I have to change some stuff because they want this size building and that size building. We're trying to work with them now, and I hope to come forward. So there's a good chance that 1 will be built, and then I'll probably start in over on 5, and then we'll do, this is why phasing is the way it is, so I can do bits and pieces of it. And I said all along, I would build 5 and 6 when I had the appropriate retailers and commercial tenants for that, as well as the senior living facility, and they're all wanting me to move pieces, so let's not worry about that. I will let my council talk about how to.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I heard 1 and then maybe 5 and 6, but 2, 3,
I
and
think the
4
short
might.
answer on that is that he's going to build it as the market allows, and will address that as quickly as he can. I think that you're getting hung up on the linear numbering of the phases.
Well, also
And-
the
and-
idea that it could be 10 years between
Yeah.
1 and 2, theoretically. That's what I'm suddenly like, is this going to be a construction zone for
So
10 years?
I guess if you want to say theoretically, that could happen, I suppose, but that's
Not the
not likely.
goal.
Why would you hold property and just sit on it while you're having to pay a bank loan without
Well,
building it out? That makes zero sense. So I'm sure we're going to move forward as quickly as we can with all of it.
Okay.
But I mean, we can't sit here and say we're going to do phase 1, then we're going to do phase 2, then we're going to do phase 3, then we're going to do phase, it's not going to work like that in the real world.
Well, I didn't know if phase 2 was going to pay for phase 3, and so as soon as 2 was done, we could start 3. I mean, that's how, when I buy things, when I have the money, I can do the next thing, but I don't know this world, so I asked because I
Well, it's
honestly
not too
didn't know.
different. It takes money, for sure.
Yeah.
And then just sort of turning, what? The bike path?
Yeah.
I'm getting there.
We're tabled until phase 5 when it comes up.
Oh, okay, so we don't need to address it?
Not unless you guys need any other clarification on the bike path.
On the bike path? Is that what you said?
I think, yeah,
No,
you guys,
I didn't hear that part, so I'm good.
I think it was Ms. Phillip was talking about the bike path. I think she's satisfied with the response.
So I think the council said that with the access to 135th Street, that I guess you're suggesting the bikers are going to go back out on 135th if they want to go, or just turn around and come back?
No, there's a traffic signal there, and then they can go south on Kenneth Road to farther south.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Sippel, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I wondered if you could put up on the screen a template of the whole development. That's fine. Would you point or circle the buildings that are going to be for rent and those that are going to be for sale? Just to confirm my understanding.
for the entire development or for phase 3 and 4?
No, the entire
Mayor.
development.
Can we make sure Mr. Sippel's mic is on?
It is on. The red
Okay.
light's on.
But I don't think he's talking into it.
Okay.
So if you could talk into it more, we'll make sure we pick you up for the minutes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's
Okay.
much better.
Okay. All right. So we will start with for rent product, and that would be these 4 buildings, the 4 stories here,
Right?
the phase 2 apartment homes, and I believe that is it. And then so the for sale product was approved in 1 and 2 would be the single family homes, the twin villas, the brownstones of phase 2 and the brownstones of phase 3, and then the work-live condos and the additional brownstones in phase 5 and 6.
Okay. All right, so the single family, the twin villas, the brownstones, there's 4 brownstone buildings in there.
6.
And 6.
There were 2 in
Oh, yeah,
phase 2.
I can see 6, I understand. Okay, those are going to all be for sale, and the people will own their units, condominium units.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, that answers my question.
Other questions that
Public
I
hearing,
might have
but-
missed from the residents? I think that captured them, I believe. Ms. Stoddard, yeah, I'm seeing a shake of head, confirmation. Okay, thank you. Mr. Osmond,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to make a move to approve this final plan tonight based off of the stipulations that have been discussed and including Ms. Phillips. Thank you.
a motion from Mr. Osmond and a second from Mr. Azeltine and Ms. Bennett. Do you want to take a stab at Ms. Phillips' comments about the east side of the church bike walk path being in as soon as possible in phase? I think the commitment was, when I can do it, I will do it in any of these phases coming up. I'm seeing a confirmation with a nod from the applicant.
Mayor, you did a darn fine job of it. I think that applicant will build the east part of the bike walk trail as soon as possible, anticipated to be with Phase 5.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. Any other comments regarding this? Well, we don't have Ms. Harrison in the room.
Uh-oh.
We kind of need her here for the vote, so more discussion while we wait. Ms.
I'll just make a
Larson.
couple of comments while we're waiting for Councilmember Harrison to come back. I really appreciate the improvements in the project. It looks better than I expected. I appreciate the work that's gone into it. My hang-up is ownership versus rental. I really feel strongly about Leawood residents being invested in our community, and for phases 3 and 4, I love the brownstone concept. I think the price point is a good price point. I just wish there were a whole bunch more of them. When we balance 36 brownstones in those 4 buildings versus the 327 apartments, that's out of balance for me. I know, factoring in the other phases affects that ratio as well, but I would just like to see more ownership for our Leawood residents. And when I did read the Planning Commission minutes, there's one typo in there that's a pretty big one about the square footage on the rental. When we're getting that improved, it said 42,680 instead of 14,680 square feet of the retail restaurant. But when the comment was made about residents not being opposed perhaps now, I was concerned that that they had given up, because we had received so many emails and communications about opposition to the development, and that does concern me, that we have Leawood residents that feel disengaged from the process. And a lot of folks have talked to me about this project, and just in general in Johnson County, there's a growing concern about the number of apartments that are going in Johnson County, and it seems to be a common theme with Johnson County residents. And so I just hope that not only this developer, but other developers will be sensitive to that concern from our residents who live here, and going forward. And I would love to see more ownership opportunities for our residents.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments before we take the vote? Mr. Sipple.
Thank you. A question for the developer. Is there an opportunity years in the future to convert some of the apartments to condominium units?
Short answer is yes.
Sure.
You can always do that. Depends on the market and how that works. Frankly, there's the law would not allow you to force rental, like I just
yes,
heard.
I understand that.
However, in answer to your question, yes, that could be done under the right circumstances, but it shouldn't be a consideration for your approval or disapproval of this.
Yes,
But there's
and I
not
understand that as well.
different construction parameters or anything like that? No, okay.
Takes platting. It takes platting. Tomahawk Creek Apartments became Tomahawk Creek condos.
Yeah. But that can be done.
It's a replat.
Thank you for your comments.
Yes, you're right.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Kane.
Just to follow up on what Mrs. Larson just said, and I can't find it in this 4 inches of material, but we did get one email, and it just broke my heart to read that email that was included in the packet about the residents not feeling heard, and feeling like we failed the residents, and that. So I just remain fundamentally opposed to this. I've been opposed all along. I remain opposed. I've said it 100 times, I'll say it again, the location of the 4-story buildings I think is wrong. And I will not be voting in acceptance of this what is before us tonight. And I too feel like, unfortunately, we didn't get as far as I thought we should have gotten on this one, although there was a lot of improvement for sure. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and I'm going to ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Phila,
Aye.
Councilmember Larson,
Nay.
Councilmember Sippel,
Aye.
Councilmember Azeltine,
Aye.
Councilmember Kane,
Nay.
Councilmember Harrison,
Nay.
Councilmember Rawlings,
Aye.
Councilmember Osmond.
Aye.
5 ayes.
All right, so the motion carries, and I
Mayor,
want
we
to
did
thank...
have, we did have that one change to the stipulations, which would require 6.
Which, because of
Ms.
the
Phyllis.
addition?
The bike trail.
All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I will vote aye as the 6th. And I want to thank the residents who came out to speak tonight, and hopefully your questions were answered. I think you heard what is the plan with the bike paths, so hopefully that will come to pass. And also, thank you to the developer for making the improvements you've made. I know that you did try. I heard a lot of comments when Oxford Promenade was approved. A lot of residents liked that, more retail, et cetera. So thank you for doing some of these additional amenities, and I hope it will prove to be a nice development, and hopefully it won't take 10 to 20 years. That wouldn't be a good thing. So,
And Mayor, may I make one more comment?
yes.
I would love to be wrong. I hope this development is awesome. And I'll be the first one to congratulate you and compliment you. I hope it's awesome for our Leawood residents, especially the ones that live nearby. I hope it's a huge success and it's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Going now to 12C, Ordinance amending Section 16-2-6.1, 16-2.6.4, and 16-3-9 of the Leawood Development Ordinance pertaining to the maximum building height in the SDO and MXD zoning districts and deviations thereto, and repealing existing Section 16-2-6.1, 16-2-6.4, and 16-3-9, and other sections in conflict herewith. Mr. Klein.
Ms. Mayor and members of the governing body, unfortunately, there was a mistake made when this went to the Planning Commission, and they did not get all the materials with regard to the minutes, and then also as far as the work session documents. So staff is actually going to recommend that this be remanded back down to the Planning Commission so they can have the benefit of those materials, and then it would come back up to the governing body.
Okay,
So
thank
moved.
you. Motion from Ms.
Second.
Phila and second from Ms. Larson to remand this to the Planning Commission. Is there a date certain for that Planning Commission meeting?
I believe it is September 26th.
September 26th. Okay. Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I read over the Planning Commission conversations about this topic. They seemed to me to be very, very brief for such a monumental, no pun intended, topic. And I want to, for the record, on another record and another set of minutes, express my concerns about once we allow something huge to be a potential thing, an LGO, whatever the rule, it will come. They will build it because it's all about the money. And so this is the time, this is the only opportunity we have to set a limit. And we all know that the world has changed since these original heights were suggested. That I just saw on the national news the other night, they came to Kansas City to talk about how offices downtown, old offices downtown are being converted to apartments, 12 and 15 story. And so they don't need huge office buildings anymore. I don't see it ever happening again. So I I hope that you all will give great consideration, since we're talking about the 135th Street corridor, my backyard, to all of the Village East conversations about density, and much of that was about height, and use that opportunity to consider when this comes back to us. But I'm saying this so that our Planning Commission people who read these minutes know I have real concerns about 8, 7, and 8-story buildings, 6, 7, and 8-story buildings along 135th, because they always seem to be built closer to the street. That stipulation seems to always get a free pass. Instead of being built 40 and 60 feet away, they're getting closer and closer to the main streets. And then we can't widen our streets in 20 years because the buildings are right there. So it's a domino effect when we let them build this big, this high. So I have concerns, and I'm glad that it's being pushed back. Thank you, Mark, for doing that and for letting them have another go at this.
Okay, Ms. Kane.
What I found out today that I wasn't aware when I talked to Mr. Klein and Ms. Stoddard, actually, was that the language about this three-fourths supermajority, as it's written in here, is also the current language now when it comes to getting a deviation. So that is unilateral there. It's not something that is just specific to this. It's not new, it's not specific, because I wondered about that too. So it is the current language that is just carrying it over. The only thing that was changed was the height. And I said it too, as long as, really quick, and then I'll shut up, I promise, right? I said it in the work session, and I'll say it again. Even as it stands, and I talked for hours to Mark, Mark wasn't there, but David Lay and Brian Scoville, 135th Street is going to be 3 lanes one way, 3 lanes the other way, and then we're going to have turn lanes, right? So even Oxford Promenade, if it goes in, if they can get financing, I don't know how somebody's going to get across 6 lanes, 8 lanes as it is, So that's a whole nother conversation. But as it stands, a quarter of our population, it could be quarter plus, is going to live along 135th Street. So in prior minutes from Chief Fitzgerald, he's already talking about the need for fire station number 5. And why? Is because the influx of people that are going to be, they're not there now, but they're coming on 135th Street. So we're going to need more fire. We're going to need to widen 135th Street, and according to David Lay, if it gets really built out, we're going to have to modify Knoll and Row and the cross sections as well, just to handle the traffic. So this is something I don't take lightly at all. We have a chance now. It doesn't say they can't have the signature building. It doesn't say that we can't keep topography in effect. And I believe we had consensus that night. That's why I asked them to pull the minutes for us and then get the minutes to planning. I believe we had consensus that night, and including the mayor, if you read the minutes, that we really do want to cap it at 4 stories, and then if they want a deviation, then we ask for the deviation. So I think, given our comments to the Planning Commission, I think they would have seen it in a different light. They didn't know it was in a vacuum to them, and they thought it was too big of a disparity, but they didn't have the benefit of our logic and the reason we had the work session to begin with. So thank you for pulling the minutes. Thank you for getting them to them. Thank you for recommending the remand, because I personally think that's exactly what needs to happen. And then whatever they decide, and we'll deal with it. But I think the benefit of the why and where it came from and the logic is paramount in their understanding. The right foot understanding what the left foot is talking about. Thank you.
Mr. Klein, when you say 55 feet,
Oh, sorry.
is that 4 stories? What is 55 feet?
55 feet, I basically went to a number of sources and found different things. Some of them way shorter, some of them taller. I essentially took as far as 15 feet on the first floor, and then I was taking 10 feet and plus maybe a little bit more. And I looked as far as when this discussion, a lot of what was mentioned was the 4 stories that were for the apartments of East Village, and those were about 52, 53 feet, and I didn't want to use just an odd number, so I just rounded it to the
Okay, so we are talking about 4 stories when we talk about 55.
4 stories based on what you've seen,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments before? We do happen to have the chairman of the Planning Commission in the audience this evening. It's hearing every word that is being said. So I'm quite sure the information will be relayed along with our minutes. So if there's no other discussion regarding the remand, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, it's approved unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Thank you.
We have no old business. We move now to new business, scheduled governing body meeting on Tuesday, September 5th, 2023, Tuesday, because Labor Day is Monday, at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Motion from Ms. Filla,
Second.
second from Mr. Azeltine. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? It's approved unanimously. Thank you. And having no further business to come before this body, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.